everyone, and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to share with you a Pennsylvania Dutch treat, something I grew up with and something that is tradition in my family that my children were brought up on as well. Today I'm going to make homemade chicken noodle soup with homemade Pennsylvania Dutch noodles. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope that you have some Pennsylvania Dutch tradition into your family in the days to come. I was going through my pantry this morning to get some chicken broth, and somehow I missed a little section in my pantry where this was from 2012. I really didn't think I had any food that old, but I wanted to show you what it looks like to have food that's 7 years old. In fact, I had to wipe the lid really close to see that it says a number 12 on it. So many times people say, well, Tessie, it says on the box that you can only have it for 18 months. The seals are good for 18 months. It's much longer than that, my friends. You can use canned goods for almost indefinitely as long as it's stored in a cool, dry place and you have a good seal on it. And the only thing that you would miss maybe is a little bit of the nutrition value when it comes to canned vegetables or canned fruit. But really, in all due honesty, your food is really good yet. So I'm going to show you what 7-year-old food looks like, and we're going to make our soup. As you can tell, this is really dark, and that is because the chicken broth, or the chicken that I cooked, was an older chicken. Sometimes the older the chicken, the more fat and the darker the broth will be, but there's nothing wrong with it. I'm thinking that this is all I have for my 2012 stash, but who knows. I try very hard to have things organized, but every once in a while, when you have a large pantry like mine, you'll miss some of the food. So the first thing you want to do is, whenever you have something home canned, is you want to make sure that it's sealed correctly. So I'm going to see how sealed this is. And that had a really good seal on it, so we're going to use it. Quarts, which is a gallon. Chicken noodle soup is the easiest thing that you could possibly make. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to take the corn that did not seal and I'm going to drain it. Now sometimes I add the liquid to it. So I'm going to check the rim of the jar to see if there's a nick in it, and there isn't. I do not know why this one didn't seal, but there's no nick in the top, so this is a good canning jar. I'm going to look at the other one. Sometimes jars just don't seal. Now that was partly sealed, but it wasn't totally sealed, and there's nothing wrong with that jar. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add the corn to this, and then I'll show you what we add next. Alright, so I added my corn and I have my chicken broth in here. Now we're going to go ahead and add the chicken. As you know from yesterday's video, I froze some chicken. So we're just going to put the frozen chicken in because it's already cooked. We're just going to lay it in here. And now all we're going to do is add a carrot, and I'm also going to add a little bit of some of my spring onions that I dried. So here's some spring onions that I dried. People often ask me, what do I do with my dried goods? And here is something that we can use in the soup. So we're just going to add a little bit, and that's going to give us a little bit of color and flavor as well. Now we're going to go ahead and add the carrots, and this soup is going to simmer for at least an hour. And while the soup is simmering, we are going to make some homemade noodles to put in the soup. So let's get the carrot, and let's get cutting the carrot up. So I have a carrot that was left over from last week's video, and it's already washed. So all we're going to do is add a little bit of carrot. Now I'm going to cut them a little more thin than I do sometimes, because this is not going to be a soup that's going to cook all day long. It's just going to cook for like an hour. So we really want our carrots to get soft. Everything else in this soup is already cooked. So basically it's heating it to a boil and then letting it simmer. here's another batch of corn. This is batch number 3, and this is another 16 pints. So I think I'm done with my installment of canning corn. I did it 3 times. I think I did 12 one time, 24 the next, and 16. So this should give me quite a supply all summer long and for next year as well. Who knows? If I go back and I still see it for 99 cents, I just may get another 12 packs. But I'm canning this while the soup is cooking, and I thought I wanted to share this part with you. Alright, so this is what the soup is turning out to look like. So it's amazing. So all I need to do is add a little salt and pepper to it, and I would do that right at the end. So there is our corn, and there's the turkey from yesterday, and just a little bit of the dehydrated onion, spring onions. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to make our noodles, and our noodles is the very last thing that we do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take 4 eggs, but 3 of them are separate. So we're going to use 3 egg yolks. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take the whites from the yolks. Some of these eggs are really large. Now we will use the whites for something else. So we have 3 egg yolks and then 1 whole egg. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to beat them lightly. Look how dark and rich in color they are because they're my own chickens and they're free ranged. Now we're going to take 1 teaspoon of salt and 3 tablespoons of water to our eggs. So it's 1 teaspoon of salt and 3 tablespoons of water. And just stir it a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead and add 2 cups of flour. Half. 2. This is some of my oven. This is some of my oven canned flour from 2016, and it's beautiful. I have a food saver now, so I wouldn't be oven canning anymore because the food saver is really nice, but I do love the oven canning if you don't have the modern equipment like a food saver. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just stir this till we get a really good dough. So we're going to incorporate this. Now we don't knead it like bread, so we're not going to knead it. We're just going to incorporate it together until it forms a really nice dough. And then we're going to put it in 2 different balls. And then we're going to roll it out. So now all we do is we're going to roll it out. Some people like a really thick dough. Some people like a really thin dough. Just going to take a little bit of flour and we're going to roll it out so it's good and smooth. So if you have a thicker dough, it would be like the traditional Pennsylvania Dutch chicken pot pie. Our chicken pot pie is not actually in a pie. It actually is a pie dough. So I think that's fairly thin. Now you can have a fancy pie cutter, which I have it somewhere out in my canning garage, or you can just use a pizza cutter. So what we're going to do is we're going to make strips. So I'm going to go this way. And then I'm going to go down this way. We don't want our noodles too big. It just depends on how you like it. So I'm going like this. Now what we do is we want to bring up our temperature to our soup, because we want to bring the soup to a boil. And when the soup is in a boil, we're going to drop our noodles in. Now we have another batch of noodles to make. So now let's turn the camera back to the soup. All right, our soup is good and hot. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to drop our noodles into the soup. My children used to always pick out the noodles in the soup because they love the noodles. And you will know the noodles are finished when they float to the top. As the longer the soup sits, the more the noodles will soak up the broth. So the next day your soup would be more like almost like a casserole. It wouldn't have near as much broth to it. But it's still good. So while I'm working the soup up to a boil, we're going to go ahead and make the rest of the noodles. The chicken noodle soup is finished. So we're going to pour some into our bowl and we're going to give it a taste test. And I hope you give this recipe a try and bring a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch traditions in your household. It's totally finished and it smells just like how Grandma Fanny made it. But before we begin eating, I'm going to share with you something I love to put in my chicken noodle soup, and it is a Pennsylvania Dutch tradition. Some of you may think this is rather strange, but others think it's just a daily part of their life. We put 1 slice of American cheese in our chicken noodle soup. We also will add cheese to our apple pie. Let me know in the comments, have you ever heard of adding cheese to your chicken noodle soup? So I added just a little bit of pepper and I added a little bit of salt. And it's really, really hot. This is something I grew up with. This is something that I raised my children on. And a homemade noodle. It's nothing like a homemade noodle. Homemade noodles are so different than the noodles that you buy at the store. They're almost a meal in themselves. Bye everybody. I hope you have a great day and I'll see you guys tomorrow. And make some chicken noodle soup with some homemade noodles. Bye everybody.